Hey explorers. So I just put the food and the water out for the birds, and I sat here for a while and photoed them, and it was very rewarding. There's a lot of red-faced, red-fronted finches. I don't know what they're called, but I'm going to look them up when I get home. I just thought I would take a drive around Cerro Gordo, see how it came out on the GoPro. Don't know if I'll publish it yet or not. But we're starting at the old Hunter house, which is where the caretaker, Robert, lives at now. It's one of the original structures of Cerro Gordo, built probably in the 1860s. And then Hunter moved on to Beveridge, and that's where he got his claim to fame at. Anyway, let me back on out of here. Didn't see the Chuckers, and I haven't seen Heckle and Jekyll this morning. Excuse me. That's a couple of ravens that live in Cerro Gordo, as long as they're fed. They live in Cerro Gordo. I can see food is scarce in the desert, as is water. So the birds really flock to the water and the food that's put out. You know, Robert always asks for bird seed, and I can understand it. I mean, it's very rewarding. So, not seeing what's on the GoPro, but to my left, that building is the old ice house. It's the first ice house ever built in Inyo County. It was built during a later zinc era rush that they had up here. At that time, this town was more of a company town and not a lawless town, as it was during the silver rush. And let's move on. You know, without looking in the GoPro, it's hard to see which building it's looking at. I just have it mounted on my visor over to the right. But the building, the two-story building that we're coming up on, is American Hotel. That was built in 1871. And it is built with all square nails, as is all of the original buildings in Cerro Gordo. Now, they've had new siding put on and stuff, and the square nails on some of them have been covered. But where the siding's coming off on the American Hotel, for example, because it does need some repair, you can see the old siding, and it's all square nails. Like I say, I don't know how this is going to come out. It might be better to just walk around with a camera that you can point at certain things and, you know, provide a description. That's the bunkhouse right there. I'm not sure when the bunkhouse was built. I just don't know which era that comes from. A lot of the sightings you see here are, excuse me, not original, because, you know, of course they've had to upkeep them. A lot of stuff's been covered with, excuse me, with tin siding because it's cheap and durable. But this large area here, this large flat area, is one of the most fascinating areas up here. Right now, you can see that there's a chapel, and I'm going to turn the truck so we make sure we capture it. But this wasn't originally a chapel. This was originally a garage. And I don't know at what point this happened, but I guess when Mike and Jody had the place, this is one of the old buildings, and as they're kind of going around seeing what's going on, they discovered a concrete floor with a stairway leading downward. They were pretty excited about it. So they started digging it out, wondering where it was going to lead. Well, it didn't lead very far. It was a grease pit. And so they determined that this was an old garage. And it was built during the zinc era, back when they, you know, started having automobiles and stuff like that. But before this garage was here, this was a big flat area, and this is where they would stage all the mules in the morning for the run down, you know, the yellow grade road and heading towards Los Angeles. As a lot of you know, they say that The silver from Cerro Gordo is what turned Los Angeles from a sleepy pueblo into a city. It wasn't just the silver coming in, but it was all of the stuff they bought for the people up here, you know, so trade coming back up here. It was the feed for the mules. They would buy like 3,000 tons of barley or something like that, and other oats and so forth, because there was so much silver and lead coming out of here that they constantly had teams going both directions. So where these rocks are here, this is the old mule barn, and Cecil, Largo, and Roger were nice enough to provide me with a picture of the old mule barn back in the day, when they have all these mules out in this flat area setting up for the run for the day. And it just fascinates me how I would love to see that mule barn restored. And when I say restored, I mean as it once was. It would be so cool. It would be one of the coolest buildings up here. Wouldn't be original, you know, but I don't know. Turn around out here the other way. I think I'd rather not hit this big machine that's right behind me here. The truck might not like that. Yeah, I think I got it. The wood structure on up the hill, that's one of three, I don't know, call it a threeplex. I don't think that's what they called it back when it was built, but it actually was a threeplex, and half the building, or 2/3 of it, fell last year during the horrible winds we had up here. And I was actually a docent up here when it happened. The wind was so bad, and I'm in a 150-year-old house myself, the Belshaw house, with old original windows that the caulkings come out of, and I was just waiting for the windows to blow out. But they held, at least in the Belshaw house. We lost windows in the bunkhouse there. We lost windows in the American Hotel. We lost them in Robert's place, the old hunter cabin, the museum, just all over. It was bad. It was peeling tin off the roofs. It was a pretty bad storm. But, you know, I was glad to be up here for it, because I love to see the desert and all of its faces. And that was definitely a face that the desert wears. Wind is a very real thing in the desert, and sometimes it can be brutal. I don't know if you can make it out, but right ahead of me is the tram launch. They had a tramway that ran from Cerro Gordo all the way down to Keeler. I don't know what the straight run of the tram would have been. I know the road up here is about 8.5 miles, so the tram's maybe 7 miles, you know, just because it was a straighter run. The building that housed the tram, the launch terminal there, it was sold off when the tram was sold. And this tram, I understand, went to Candelaria, but it was never erected. I don't know if it's still sitting there rusting, or it's been, you know, taken by people that want to have a big ore bucket in their front yard, or what. Straight ahead of me is the Gordon House that was built during the zinc era for Louis D. Gordon's wife. I don't know if he had children or not. Must have been lonely for her up here, because there were very few women even during the zinc era up here. Probably more women during the silver era, and most of them were ladies of the night. I find a lot of their shoes when I walk the mountainside. Small, little, petite shoes, you know. All I find are the leather soles all curled up, and that's it. You can tell they're old, though. And then over to the left is what they refer to as the Chinaman Shack. And I don't mean that in a racial way. I'm just passing on what it's called. And what I think happened here, let me turn a little more. In front of the Chinaman Shack is the Belshaw house. That's where Mortimer Belshaw lived. He was one of the 3 partners in the Union Mine, which was the main mine up here. and he pretty much controlled the town because he also built and controlled the only road in and out of Cerro Gordo. And because he charged toll, it really angered the residents. They tried to build a road around, and there's just only one way in here. So there's one spot you can't get around. So they were pretty much subject to his toll. But what I think's happened here is the shack behind the Belshaw house is where Belshaw's cook lived. And he would come in through the back into the kitchen and do his cooking. And that's just my guess. Nobody really knows, you know. And then lastly, well, not lastly, I don't know if you can make it out, but over to my extreme left, the 10 siding, that is the museum now. Kind of a dispute over what it used to be. I won't even go into it because we don't really know for sure. But I don't think it was here during the Silver Rush. I think it was here during the zinc era. I think they've at least determined that. Beyond and straight out, you can see two wooden buildings. The one on the left is the assay house. It is still filled with all of the assay equipment and other pretty neat stuff. The small structure to its right was a, how would you call it? I don't want to say brothel. Maybe it was a brothel. I mean, it's kind of small, but yeah, it was a brothel. And then again, another view of the launch for the trams. So that's Cerro Gordo. You know, I hope this comes out and I'm able to show it online. Talk to you later.